The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Hurst. I'm with the Trust Company of Tennessee, and many of you are returning for what we call Retirement Plan Academy. And for those of you here for the first time, thanks for being here. We do this once a month, and we cover all kinds of topics around the retirement plan space. And this one might be the most interesting at this point in time with what's going on and all that we're hearing and around student debt. And some of you are probably out there saying, what in the world is student debt relief and retirement plans? How do these even tie together? So we're going to try to answer that as we go. Quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Trust Company of Tennessee, we are a financial planning firm, offices in Knoxville, Chattanooga, and Tri-Cities. Also on screen with me, you'll see Adam Davies. Adam is a chartered financial analyst with our group, and he heads up our retirement plan services out of the Knoxville office. Camilla Inara is with Vault. We're going to talk a lot more about Camilla's position there and what she does there day to day, but she's the Senior Partner Success Manager with Vault, so more to come there. And again, I've been introduced. I'm a certified financial planner out of our Chattanooga office. Camilla, Adam, I think it's pretty fitting for the times today. Adam's working from home in Knoxville. I'm in Knoxville. I'm usually in Chattanooga in Adam's office. If you see his diplomas in the background, Camilla is up in Brooklyn. And somehow this is all normal in today's time. So I'm excited to get this going. I do have a couple of housekeeping items to cover before we jump into the materials here. Number one is on your screen, you will see a questions box in here. Please fire away as we go, and we may be able to address those as we go. Certainly we'll leave time at the end if that's not the case. We also have people here who will receive continuing ed credit either through HRCI or SHRM. And for those of you who apply to those two categories, you will receive an email from us after this within the next probably 3 or 4 days with those codes. As soon as we get those, we will pass those along. Some of you are here for CPE credit or receiving CPE credit as part of this. I'm going to use my cheat sheet on this because this is a new one that we're offering and there's a few more details on this. So bear with me 1 second. I just need to provide a reminder. We are going to have 3 poll questions, which you will need to answer in order to receive this credit. You also need to stay on for at least 50 minutes. And we do have an evaluation form after the program today, so you will need to fill that out. And once you do all that, and once we submit everything to them, you'll receive an email from that group with your certification. So that, I think, covers what I needed to cover with that. And Adam, if you want, I believe, Adam, do you hold the screen right now?
I do, so we can go ahead and jump in.
That's great. So we kind of covered who we are, and if you want to jump to the beginning of the issue at hand and start us out with that, Adam, then fire away.
Yep, and I believe we have our first poll question before we jump in.
I'm sorry, you're right, we do. Yeah, thank you. The first one, you'll see it here. It says, do you think of student loans as a burden to your employees? And I'm a little curious about this, and Camilla, I think we're going to cover this a little bit later, maybe as we go, but I'm curious to see different industries and if there are patterns between certain industries where the answer to this is yes and others where it's no. And it's just curiosity. I really don't know. So we'll see what people come back with.
There certainly is. So let's see the answers, and then I can kind of speak to what industries definitely do.
Cool. Okay. And there you have it. So we've got about 3/4 of people who either think or probably know. A lot of our people in here are in the HR position, so you certainly probably have a pretty good idea of who's facing what types of challenges, and certainly this is one of them. I know we at the Trust Company of Tennessee, our answer is yes, right? Almost all of us have somebody who's dealing with this, or some percentage of our people who are dealing with this. And Camilla, I think you wanted to address that.
Yeah, I think there's some very obvious industries where it is a huge burden, in particular, and especially during the last year, healthcare, nurses, doctors, very burdened by student debt. But also if you're recruiting younger employees, it's very rare to see new graduates come out of school with no debt, or even graduates from master's programs come out with no debt. So even if you're not in the healthcare space, I would say anyone who's recruiting new grads is realizing that this is a huge burden.
And I know we work with a lot of attorneys as well, and I'd certainly include them in that group as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any master, graduate degrees.
Got it.
Well, why don't we hop right in?
Jump in, Adam.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the student loan issue. You know, it's been talked about a lot the last couple of years, but it is a $1.7 trillion problem. You know, that's the cumulative value of the student loan debt out there. It affects 44 million Americans. But what probably isn't as well known is that, you know, it does impact retirement savings. So it impacts about 1 in 3 employees participating in retirement plans. And it isn't just those younger employees. You know, often we see a lot of older folks might take out student loans to help their children, you know, attend college. So it's not just affecting those 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that you might be hiring in your organization.
Adam, if I can speak to that, I think, you know, we do a lot of financial planning at our firm with individuals that are, a lot of them being in our retirement plans. You're exactly right. You know, oftentimes we're trying to solve for people 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever they might be, and kind of looking towards retirement and what does that look like. We're trying to solve for trying to save towards that, but we're going up against these challenges of whether sometimes it's them, right? If you're in your 40s, you're still paying this down, and so they've got this battle where they've got this lingering thing they can't get rid of, and therefore can't save more for retirement. And you're right, then other people help kids out or whatever it might be, and so I'd say more often than not, when we're doing financial planning, we're running into people who have some kind of challenges around this.
In fact, the highest growing demographic of folks with student loans is not those that are 18 to 25. It's those that are 60 plus, because we even see grandparents taking out loans for their grandchildren or their children that are going back to school. So you'll find that it's not only the younger demographic at your companies that are looking for student loan assistance, it's everyone across the board.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have figured that, you know, the fastest growing demographic would be those, you know, those folks saving for children or grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about 3 different ways you can offer a student loan benefit to your employees. The first of which are student loan matching programs. So Zach introduced this, but I'm sure a lot of you are saying, you know, what is that connection between student loans and retirement plans? And so it all started back in 2018. Abbott Laboratories, you know, they make pharmaceuticals, other healthcare products. And so what they were finding was that a lot of their employees are engineers, scientists, people that have those advanced degrees. And so they weren't participating as part of their retirement plan because they were, you know, focused on paying down their student loans. So what Abbott Laboratories did was they went to the IRS, they requested what's called a private letter ruling. We'll talk a little bit more in a second about what that is, but essentially they said, hey, you know, for those people who, you know, maybe can't afford to save for their retirement or who aren't saving for their retirement because they're paying down their student loans, can we still give them a special contribution to the 401k plan so that they don't miss out on that employer match? So how does that work in practice? Under their traditional 401k plan, if an employee deferred 2%, they would receive 5% from Abbott Laboratories. So they said, would like to apply that same concept to the student loan matching program, and that's where that private letter ruling came in. So with that private letter ruling, they got special permission from the IRS for just them in this one instance to be able to still make that contribution into the retirement plan. So as long as employees could demonstrate that they were paying at least 2% of their pay towards student loans, Abbott Laboratories was still able to give them that 5% contribution into the retirement plan. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see they estimate that that would contribute an extra $50,000 into the retirement plan from the employer over that 10-year period.
And there you have, we talked about financial planning and trying to go down a path with people with these 2 challenges of saving for retirement and taking care of student debt relief or just debt relief, whatever it might be. And there's a solution, right? And I know that at this point, you know, this isn't for everybody, right? But it's at least a start. And Camilla, I think you're going to be able to talk to us a little bit more about what's happening out in this world right now. But Adam, do you want to jump to the next one if you're?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you are, you know, listening to this and saying, hey, that's a pretty neat concept. Can I add that to my plan? And I would say the technical answer is yes. You know, if you went through the same private letter ruling process that Abbott Laboratories went through, you can add it to your plan. Now, the practical answer is no. That is a very expensive process. It's a very time-consuming process. And so most companies aren't going to find it worthwhile to go through that private letter ruling process to get that special permission that Abbott Laboratories got. But I'd say one of the good takeaways that we're seeing is that because Abbott Laboratories, because the IRS gave Abbott Laboratories that special permission, it indicates that they do view this benefit favorably. And so because of that, we've seen a lot of interest from legislators, the public, retirement plan providers, other companies like Vault, involved with student loan benefits. A lot of people have thought this is a really good solution, and so we've seen it included in a lot of proposed legislation. You can see some of those here on the screen. So I'd be surprised if this doesn't continue to come up and could eventually be adopted as part of future legislation so that it is opened up to other companies. Now, Camilla, I know that you guys have a Vault Match service. I imagine it's not too popular since it's not universally available right now, but you're probably laying the infrastructure for when it does become available. Can you tell us a little bit about how that would work?
Exactly. So like you mentioned before, we're laying the infrastructure, and we're currently working with some employers who have decided to go through the IRS private letter ruling process. And Abbott Labs does have a public PLR, but there are others that have their own PLRs that have not been made public. And we're working with companies who want to help their employees pay down their student debt and save for retirement, and employers that see that there's a lot of unmatched 401k funds left on the table. So what Vault does is, with the Vault Match product, we're able to allow employees to opt in to Vault Match during open enrollment. They set up their student loan accounts on our platform. We start tracking their student loan payments, and then we report back to the employer, to the retirement provider, what payments were made so that those other parties can make the match into the 401k or their retirement account. So from our standpoint, we're really here to provide the student loan tracking capabilities that may be burdensome for the employer to do themselves, not having to collect, everyone's statement monthly or regularly. We take care of the student loan payment tracking so that the employer and the retirement provider can make the match. We also work with a few different retirement providers, and we're laying the foundation there so that we can have more integrations with them if one of the legislations that are listed here passes, and hopefully some of them do. We're creating the integrations with retirement providers currently so that we have the integration capabilities later on.
So Camilla, I know sometimes employees might have several different student loans with many different providers. How would they enter that information on your system, or how would you guys be able to create that linkage to view that information?
That's a great question. We've been around since 2013, so we've been able to link to most all federal student loan providers, as well as an extensive list of private student loan servicers. There hasn't been a new one that we've had to add, at least in the past year. But if there ever is a provider that we don't have in our system yet, it only takes about 2 to 3 business days to add them. So it's all very automatic. They just log into their servicer through our platform, and we start doing the tracking. There's really no uploading of documents that has to be done by the employees. It's a very simple tech forward process.
Well, I certainly think this is a pretty exciting benefit, and I'm looking forward to seeing if and when it does get included in legislation, because I think a lot of companies are really going to want to add this when it becomes available, for that very same reason that a lot of people are missing out on that valuable account growth because they're focusing on their student loans.
Definitely.
So next, we're going to talk about some practical options you can implement right now, since this student loan matching provision is not currently available to all plans.
Yeah, and on this, Camilla, I think just generally speaking, so we know about Abbott at this point, right? And that's the big case that some people on this call may have already heard about before today. We now know through Adam that that's not readily available. if you don't go through a significant process to try to get there. So what's out there now? I mean, what can we as plan sponsors or providers do at this point?
So I think that's a really good segue to what we're looking at now. And since the Vault Match program isn't readily available to everyone, what was codified last year with the CARES Act and with the extension of the CARES Act in December is that employers are now able to contribute up to $5,250 to employee student loans, tax advantaged, for the next 5 years. If any employer on the line or any employer in the US has a tuition reimbursement program, they'll know that the $5,250 matches the same amount that's tax advantage under Section 127 of the IRS code that allows for tuition reimbursement. So essentially the government was saying, we want to expand the education related benefits that you can provide to your employees on a tax advantage basis. It is something that is not necessarily budget neutral. The money isn't coming from your employees. The money has to come from the employers themselves. The tax advantages come from employees not having to pay income tax on the contributions and employers not having to pay payroll taxes. But it still allows, similar to Vault Match, employers to help their employees pay down their student debt so that more funds are available for retirement savings, emergency savings, etc. There are, I don't know if you had any questions there, or I can go into how the plans are designed.
I think it'd be great to go into how they're designed. I have one quick question on the slide that you might be getting to. On the last bullet, it says, unlike retirement plans, it's not subject to ERISA. I guess I hate to use this word in this phrase, but does that mean that we can discriminate? I mean, can you decide which pockets? And I don't know if Camilla, that's a you question or an Adam question, but can we decide which employees get this benefit and which don't?
Yes, so I think that's a great segue to talk about the plan design because it is a very flexible benefit. And I would say that the most common type of benefit is providing $100 to $150 a month to eligible employees, but the employer can decide who's eligible. So you can say, I have a goal to recruit a certain type of employee. I have a goal to retain a certain type of employee, and you can give the benefit only to that group. For example, if you're a healthcare system, you give the benefit to a certain group of nurses in a certain location. There is, similar to retirement plans, some non-discrimination testing, but it's really to not give the benefit to the highest earners in your organization. So as long as you're not giving it to the highest earners, you do have the ability to pick and choose who gets the benefit. You can also create groups and say, some of our employees that are here and have been here for a long time, we want to retain them, we want to give them more, versus younger ones, we want to give them less. You can design that type of program, or you can have a vesting schedule and give employees more towards their student loans as they stay with the company longer. So it really is a flexible benefit. The employer decides the parameters. They give those parameters to Vault and we set it up in our system. Something else to know is that the way that you start the program with Vault is not the way that the program is going to be in 1-2 years. So you can say right now we choose to roll out the program with these employees as a pilot, but then once you see the program's benefits in terms of retention or recruitment, you can expand the benefit. We don't have really any constraints as to this is how it has to stay as you're working with Vault. And like you mentioned, Zach, it's not really subject to ERISA. There is some constraints with non-discrimination testing from higher earners, but you can design the plan as needed.
Got it. I'm sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's pretty interesting considering what we see in the retirement plan space where, you have to be very careful not to use Zach words, discriminate against a certain group. So, I mean, you could even get as specific as within the nursing population, if you're having trouble recruiting night shift nurses, third shift nurses, you could offer it just to them and not the person second shift. So you can definitely tailor this exactly to the recruitment or retainment goals of your organization.
Exactly.
And Camilla, we had a question come in, and I'll just read it out. It says, can you repeat the amount the employer can contribute to paying off the employee student loans? And I believe that was a monthly payment you mentioned.
So there's really no ceiling to the amount that you can give. The tax advantage amount is $5,250. We're actually not seeing employers give that full tax advantage amount because the average we're seeing employers give is around $100 to $150 a month. And I would say it's even for smaller employers or larger employers, it's a big budgetary constraint to say, we want to give the full $5,250 to each employee that has student loans. So right now, not many employers are taking advantage of the full amount, but they're giving $100 to $150 on average.
So Camilla, I'm thinking about student loans, and sometimes those can drag out into 10, 20, 30 years. If you're offering $1,000 or $5,000 a month, that could get pretty expensive. Do some companies put lifetime caps on it?
Yes, I would say the majority of companies put lifetime caps. The average for the clients we work with is around $10,000. And again, that's in line with getting your payments for around 10 years from your employer, which is a good retention benefit, I would say.
All right, well, why don't we transition to the next slide? And so, I think we touched on this with the match program, but, if your employers or employees do have different providers for their student loans, how do you work with them, setting them up? Is it difficult?
Mm-hmm. Again, similar to the Vault Match program, of course, we've been running Vault Pay for even longer than we've been running Vault Match. And similar to Vault Match, employees just have to connect to their student loan servicers. If for any reason we don't have them in our system, we can definitely add them on. But federal and private loans are covered through Vault Pay. Once an employer decides to launch with us, employees receive an email invitation to Vault, and they'll just connect to their student loan servicers from there. And from an employer standpoint, I would say that it is pretty easy to administer. The only hard part comes when the employer has to decide how they want to design their plan. But we help employers understand what their goals are for the benefit, when they want to launch, how long they want the benefit to run. And we're able to help them design a plan that will work for them in the short term and in the long term. We want this to be a sustainable benefit for everyone. And what the employer has to do to administer the program is really just log on to our administrative portal, enter the employees that are eligible, and then after they've told us their parameters, there's really no ongoing work to do other than send the contributions via ACH at the cadence that was selected during plan design. So it's not a lot of extra work to administer. The work really comes when designing the program.
And just to be clear on this, offering a benefit like this, and Adam, I think you touched on this. So all of a sudden they're gonna offer this to a certain portion of their employee base, right? People who need this. Maybe it's like Adam said, it's a trying to incent people to go to third shift, whatever it might be. On the 401k side or the retirement plan side, Adam, you cannot then exclude these people, right? This still has to be, any match you have has to apply to them as well.
Yeah, that's a big no-no in the retirement plan world.
Yeah.
So I know we had that question about the amount, so we did cover it earlier, but in case you do want to write that down, it is $5,250, and it really is a good tax benefit to both employers and employees because it's tax deductible to employers, not included as part of the gross income to employees. And when we first saw this kind of added, it was with the CARES Act in March. But if you think back to this time last year, the world was a pretty scary place. I don't think a lot of companies were really looking to enhance their benefits at that time. Camilla, did you see much adoption early on when it was initially passed?
You're right, Adam. About a year ago, last year, it wasn't something that employers were really thinking about. I think they were probably thinking about slimming down benefits or just trying to give benefits that were mental health or health related. But now we're seeing an uptick because not only was it extended for the rest of this year, the tax advantages were extended for an additional 5 years, which gives employers a good amount of time to see if this type of benefit is going to work to recruit and retain employees, and see how much they're able to save their employees in time and in payments for the life of their loans.
Yeah. Adam, I was reading a question that came in while you were talking about the 5,250. So I'm sorry if you covered this and I missed it. But the question is, do you know if the vault match is tax deductible for the employer? Camilla, I guess that's one for you.
Answer that one.
Well, I think Adam will know more about the retirement tax advantages of the 401k, but vault match is just as tax advantaged as your retirement programs because you're still matching into the 401k, if that makes sense. So there's really no payments that come through vault or payments that come to the employee student loans. You're getting all the same tax advantages that you are through your retirement plan.
And that's where that private letter ruling to the IRS was especially helpful, because that's where they were giving you that special permission.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So we've talked about 2 benefits so far. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about the third one, student loan advice programs. And it sounds pretty similar to what you would imagine based on the title, but essentially there's a program that Vault offers, Vault Advisor, that really helps people get guidance and education on their student loans. So Camilla, do you want to walk us through how you guys implement that?
Sure. So Vault Advisor is the program that employers use initially if they don't have a good sense of what the student loan landscape looks like at their organization. What Vault Advisor allows your employees to do is to upload their student loans, both federal and private, see it all in one place, because what borrowers are doing is they're getting one loan, at least one loan per semester, and they could have different servicers for those loans, different interest rates, but we put it all in one place so that they can see their total loan balance, their total loan monthly payment, et cetera, et cetera. And then we give them different pathways to optimize those loans. If they want to pay their loans off faster, we show them that even a little bit extra per month can make a really huge difference over the life of their loan. And we give them options as to how to allocate those additional funds to either the loan with the highest interest or the loan with the lowest balance, and how that makes a difference over the life of their loans. We also give them different options for federal repayment programs. We show them what they would be eligible for, how much their monthly payments would be reduced by entering into a federal program. And if they're eligible for forgiveness, we would show them how to apply for forgiveness, because it is a yearly application. Finally, we also have a section on refinancing. Vault doesn't do any of the refinancing ourselves. We're not a loan originator, but we do have vetted vendors that they can look into for refinancing, or they can really go out there online, look for their own vendor. And then what we ask is that they come back in and plug in their new terms so that they can see how much they would actually be saving. We also allow employers to allow employees to share the benefit with their family members, because as we were mentioning at the beginning, student loans are not an individual issue, they're a household issue. So it's a tool that you can share with your family members and friends. Even if some of your employees don't have student loans, I would bet that they have a family member that does, and they can share with Vault Advisor with the family member. And finally, we have one-on-one counselors that employees can call into and can answer their questions. And the counselors are at no additional cost to the employer or the employee.
That's great. What was it, Camilla? You mentioned something in there that you said something has to be renewed annually. What was that?
Some of the forgiveness programs offered by the federal government require annual applications. So we provide resources to employees to help them understand how to go through that process annually. What are the requirements for that process? And our counselors are also very educated in the process. So if there are questions or outstanding portions of the application, our counselors can help them work through that. Even if it's yearly, our counselors are available 24/7 to answer questions.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love that there's, this is such a great thing for employers to be able to offer, and the service that you all provide, it sounds like, to the employer is great, but the fact that employees have full access to, that's probably a game changer for a lot of plan sponsors or people you're dealing with on this side.
Yeah, and I would say that one important thing is if you're giving your employees a contribution to their student loans, you want their student loans to be in a manageable place. And that's what Vault Advisor is allowing them to do. If they can't afford their student loan payments as is, if they're not in a place where they're comfortable with their student loans, any additional contribution that you as an employer is giving them is not going to make a huge difference because they're completely overwhelmed. So Vault Advisor is giving your employees a way to take control of their student loans, put them in a good position, so every dollar the employer gives them makes a big difference.
So when, as I think about what we do at the trust company, we serve our clients as a fiduciary. So when we're picking investments, when we're giving them advice, we don't have a product to push, so there's no conflict of interest. And I heard you say earlier that, you're not an originator. You don't, it seems a very similar service model, and that you're purely trying to recommend what's best for the employee. Is that the case?
It is the case, Adam. So we're conflict free, like I mentioned before. We don't originate loans. There are others that do what we do in the student loan assistance space, but they may be pushing employees to refinance their loans. Especially in the last year, this has been a great thing for us because federal loans are at $0 payments and 0% interest. So we're recommending that folks stay with their federal loans, take advantage of that 0% interest, and if they're able, to continue to pay down their loans so that they can pay their loans off faster. Anyone who would have refinanced in the past year would have lost those federal protections. Anyone who's seeking forgiveness and refinances loses the ability to receive forgiveness after 10 or 25 years. So we're not pushing anyone to do something that may jeopardize their forgiveness. We're trying to provide holistic guidance, and refinancing is a part of that. We understand that there's some folks that are in a really good financial position that they're going to save a lot by refinancing to a very low interest rate, and we give them the options to do so, but that's not what's going to work for everyone. And we're very educated on the fact that some may not benefit from refinance, and we're not pushing anyone that way.
Camilla, we just had a good question come in that you just covered, but I want to be sure it's clear. This question came in from somebody who is with a nonprofit, and the question was around their employees' eligibility for forgiveness, right? Go to the loan forgiveness program. And it sounds like, if I heard you correctly, that would impact that, right? So they need to be careful about putting these people in this if they are trying to get forgiveness on these loans.
Yes. So if it is a nonprofit and employees are trying to seek forgiveness, like I mentioned before, what Vault does is we provide additional resources for them to reapply every year for the forgiveness, to call in to experts that are knowledgeable about the forgiveness process. And the important thing to note about our platform is because we don't have skin in the game when it comes to refinance, if the employer doesn't want to show the refinance pathway, we can take that out. It's a very dynamic tab, or if they have a specific language that they want to show their employees about refinance, an additional call out, we can add that in. So whoever asked the question is correct. Anyone who would refinance would lose their ability for forgiveness, and we're hoping that they'll achieve that forgiveness, so we wouldn't push them to refinance, and we would work with the employer to make sure that the platform shows what the employer wants to show regarding refinance.
Great, thank you. And Adam, I've got another poll question. Did you want to add anything to this, Adam, before I jump to that?
Just a personal curiosity. I can imagine people have so many questions about student loans. What would you say is the most common thing that people call in looking for guidance on with the service?
The most common thing I would say is around forgiveness, because we do work with a majority of nonprofit clients, and especially prior to COVID, it was a yearly application and it was lengthy. And I think it is very known that only 1% of folks that apply for forgiveness actually receive the forgiveness. So we try our best to make sure that employees stay on track and are making their payments on time and they receive that forgiveness. So I think that's what we're most well versed in, is the forgiveness portion, but there's really nothing that our counselors can't answer. They're certified in student loans, and they're certainly able to answer any questions about the platform itself or about student loans. The platform answers a majority of questions, and our counselors typically, finalize someone's questions or their journey within 1 to 2 calls.
Did you say 1% or less than 1% actually achieve?
1.
That's frightening. And is that because they're doing something that they just don't know how this whole thing works and they just make a mistake and they don't realize it?
Yes, because the application has to happen annually, and payments you have to make 120 payments on time, and that can be very burdensome if you have a lot of debt, and just impossible if you're not paying attention, if you're not enrolled in auto pay. So a lot of years of payments, and if one is missed, you could not achieve the forgiveness.
Gosh, that's terrible. I had no idea it was that low. I mean, that's scary.
Yeah, it is scary.
Well, let's introduce the second poll question. And there we have it. Let me move my screen around so I can actually see what I'm talking about. But the question is, which benefit do you think employees would value most? Is it retirement plan match for those paying student debt, direct employer assistance with employee student loans, or access to student loan advice? Adam is really hoping that it is the retirement plan piece. We'll see.
Well, I think it's neat. We've talked about these 3 different benefits. I'm curious which ones you guys are most interested in.
Yeah. Any guesses as to which one's going to win this?
Even
The
though I'm
second
pulling for number 1, I'm thinking number 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't be the one answering here.
That's right. We'll give it one more second and get the results here. There we go. You got it.
All right.
But pretty good response for all 3 of these things. And clearly all of these are, on our minds and how we can help employees in various ways. So pretty interesting to see the results on that one. So with that, we are going to jump into a quick case study. Camilla, you're going to talk us through Nebraska medicine with this. And I think really we've talked about what this is and conceptually how it works, but what does it actually mean when put into motion?
Yeah, so we started working with Nebraska Medicine at the beginning of 2019. So really important to note here that it was prior to COVID. And Nebraska Medicine had Vault Advisor first. With Vault Advisor, they were able to see what their nurses were burdened by in terms of student loans. They found that 16% of their gross income was going to pay student debt, what the average debt was for their nurses, which is around $38,000, and what the nurses were paying on average towards their loans, which was around $350. So using Vault Advisor as a proxy to see what your employees are dealing with when it comes to their student loans. We were then able to implement a student loan repayment for a certain group of nurses that Nebraska Med was having trouble recruiting. Nebraska Medicine actually employs around 60 to 70% of the physicians and nurses in the state of Nebraska. So they're pretty large, but obviously they didn't want to roll this out to everyone because there are budgetary constraints. So what they did is that they selected a group of bedside nurses who would receive $100 a month towards their student loan debt, again, prior to COVID, and it was only bedside nurses in a specific location. What they saw was that they shortened the lifespan of nurses' loans by 64 months, and turnover was greatly reduced for those nurses. Turnover for nurses enrolled in the benefit was 6.9% versus turnover at 13.7% for nurses who did not have the benefit. So really huge savings due to turnover reduction. And additionally, because of those savings, Nebraska Med rolled out to additional locations last summer, and they're rolling out to even more locations this summer. So like I mentioned before, the way you start with us is not the way you're necessarily going to be with us in a few years. And they're still providing the same $100 a month, but they've seen the benefits to not only turnover reduction, but just overall savings in recruiting new nurses. So they are expanding the benefit, and it's been a really good partnership with such a huge employer. I recognize that, not everyone has the turnover that we see with nurses in healthcare, but similarly, we have case studies with clients in the insurance industry and in the technology space where they see similar benefits to recruitment and retention.
And you probably addressed this. It sounded like recruitment and retention with this particular case too, but was there one more than the other that really drove this for them?
For them, it was mostly the retention, because they were looking to retain in certain spaces, especially during COVID. I would say that's why they expanded it last summer.
Got it. Okay, thanks. So that is, you've given us a real life example of what happens and why we might want to implement this and sort of how it's implemented. But for the rest of us who are out here thinking about, well, how could this work for our companies? Can you talk us through a little bit of the implementation, who it's right for, things of that nature?
Sure. So I would say that this really is a benefit that can be implemented in a wide variety of industries across a wide variety of employer sizes. We don't have any limit to the amount of employees you may have. We work with companies that have 20,000 employees, and we work with companies that have 20 employees. We give the same level of service to all our employers. What happens is when you select to work with Vault, we have a team here that will work with you through the implementation process and on an ongoing day-to-day basis once you launch with us. They set up a kickoff call with the employer and the points of contact there. They'll provide you with marketing collateral and communication collateral for your employees. If you haven't settled on a plan design, they'll help you create that plan. And like I mentioned before, we have an administrative portal where you can track your employee adoption, see the metrics associated with the student debt at your organization in aggregate, and our team will give you a training on how to use that portal.
Okay.
So Camilla, I imagine that as you're going through this implementation process, sometimes companies might start broad and see the cost of it and then need to shrink it down. How do you guys help with that sort of analysis?
Of course. So I would say that mostly happens during the implementation process, of course, prior to launching. The way that we recommend, if there is certain budgetary constraints, is again, going back to the employer's goals. So if they have a specific group that they want to retain or recruit, we recommend starting there as a pilot and then expanding from there. We really need to have a little bit more data from the employers if they want us to make recommendations. But typically, they'll let us know we're having problems recruiting this type of employee, or this type of role is really hard to find. So we'll adjust to that and say, okay, how many employees do you have or do you need in that role? And what is the maximum that you are willing to give them per month, and design the benefit that way.
Maybe one other thing that came to mind was, when we were looking at that Nebraska medicine case study, I mean, in their case, they were able to shorten the loan duration by 64 months. I mean, that's 5 years. I imagine that makes a pretty big difference in a lot of people's lives. Beyond just the benefits to the employees, I would imagine that builds quite a bit of goodwill with the employer and, makes them more loyal to the organization.
Definitely a lot of benefits for retention to the employer. And then again, just going back to recruiting, that's another benefit to the employer. And then also you're working with a company that's been in the space for a long time. So it's not a new company. Vault is not a company that doesn't know what we're doing. We've been here for a while. And if there are any questions that your employees have, we're here to answer them. And we really have a platform that's very technology forward. So not only from the employee standpoint as they're signing up, but from the employer standpoint, they're able to see the metrics, they're able to see the adoption in real time, how the benefit is working.
Adam, that's a good point where you talked about, up to 5 years on that. And when we deal with clients on the planning side, always not always, but almost always anybody's biggest concern when they come to us to talk through what's going on in their financial life is the debt side, right? If they have debt, they're carrying that burden. That's the first thing that comes up. And if it's credit card debt, typically we can put them on a 1 to 2 to 3 year plan and get that paid off, right? And just kind of be done. But this student debt piece is just so long and lingers over them for so long that if you can go to them and say, through this benefit or a benefit like this, we're knocking 5 years off of that, that's substantial. And it really kind of, I think, changes their perspective and outlook to say, okay, this all of a sudden we're humans, right? We always work better in shorter chunks, right? And when you see this 20-year horizon, it's just so burdensome, and to knock that off, knock off 5 years or whatever that remaining is really impactful.
It definitely is.
So plan design and communication. This is, I'm curious about this, Camilla. We talk a lot about this on the retirement plan side, but what does this look like for you as you deal with employers?
So like I mentioned before, we provide a really high touch service to employers of any size. What we like to do is communicate to your employees the way you communicate to your employees. So our team takes a lot of time during the implementation to understand what you're looking for and how you want to talk to your employees. We have a lot of email communication set up that you can send to them prior to us launching so that they know that the benefit is coming and they're kind of teed up to receive it. What we like to do is on the day of the launch, invite employees via email and then have the employer send additional collateral in terms of flyers or notifications on intranet, on online portal that the employer might have internally so that they understand what the benefit is about. The third thing that is, I think, most critical is when Vault is able to conduct a live webinar for employees. What we do is we set up a time that most employees can join and we walk through a live demo of the platform and answer questions live so that employees have a chance to understand how the benefit works. And also if there are pending questions or questions that they don't necessarily need to talk to a counselor, but they want to ask live, sorry, my headphones fell out, they can definitely do so during the webinar.
And so
the last thing I wanted to mention though is that implementation takes 30 days on average. The only one that might take a little bit longer is Vault Match if there is conversations that we need to have with a retirement provider or payroll at times. But for Vault Pay and for Vault Advisor, it's 30 days maximum to implement.
And you answered the question I was going to ask, but is this the same for all the 3 services, or is there any communication differences between Vault Advisor versus Pay or Match?
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously the products are a little bit different, so the collateral and the materials are going to look different, but I would say what we really want to target is if the employer has any benefits site online, we want to make sure we have communication there. We want to make sure they have their email communication. We want to make sure they get a webinar if that's feasible for the employer. And then anything additional is what we would work with during the setup process to cover and to create.
Gotcha. Let's do one more poll question and then stick around for a few minutes because there are some really good questions in here that I want to tackle. Starting with the poll question, this is, do you think you will consider adding a student loan benefit to employees in the future? And you got a couple of yes choices here. One, match once legislation permits. Yes, reimbursement for tax benefits. No, loans aren't an employer problem. Or no, other benefits have higher priorities. All fair answers. I would imagine that, as we talk about Abbott sort of setting the stage for this and that not being readily available, I would imagine that if that ever does become, then number one is going to become really popular. What do you think, Camilla?
I agree.
Yeah. We don't like burdensome, time-consuming processes. It sounds like that one is. So.
Especially now with the IRS.
Yeah, exactly right. And we'll see the results here. No other benefits have higher priorities. Sure. I mean, there are a lot of different benefits that we offer to our employees, and they all matter. And it depends on who our employee base is as to what pertains to who. But interesting here, no, loans aren't an employer problem. Not a single person answered that.
Yeah.
So
That is
while
interesting.
it might be more popular in certain segments, right, or sectors, clearly everybody has at least some portion of their employee base that's dealing with that.
And a pretty equal split between the match and, pay benefit.
So I've got some questions I really like in here. Number one, Camilla, this is probably a pretty easy one for you. Are there any states that this benefit cannot be implemented in?
No, not at this time. It's available for all states.
And what about corporations who have employees, non-resident employees?
That's a good question. Vault can only conduct repayment on US-based loans.
Gotcha.
So
All
it
right,
may
so
be a foreigner that received US-based loans, and we can do that. But if they receive their loans outside of the country, we can't do that.
Got it. Okay. So many of us, it's around the country, I know, but many of us in Tennessee who live in Knoxville, Chattanooga, wherever it might be, and have children, we start thinking about, do we do public school or private school, right? And private school is pretty popular in a lot of our bigger cities here. And the question, of course, is, as you can tell by how I set it up, is what if we take out student loans to pay for, just call it private high school? Could that be part of this?
So we don't see employers opting in to pay off employees' debt for children in terms of K through 12 schooling for private school. But we do have employers who are looking into contributing to employees' 529 accounts for saving for college education. So it is something that we're actually launching this summer, is employer contributions to 529s, and that will allow employers to expand the contributions that they can give to employees, not only to pay down student debt, but to save for college.
I like that you went down that path, because we actually just had a client not too long ago implement that same type of benefit. But ultimately, they first decided against it, thankfully, to go with the UTMA account, right? And I just want to point out to people who might be considering this, if you want to contribute towards a child's college savings for your employee, the 529 path is going to be your best way to go. The UTMA path, you control the investments a little bit more. Maybe there's a wider range that you could invest in, but that money upon the age of majority belongs to that child, whether they want to use it for college or not. So I just want to clarify that if you are thinking about that benefit, as Camilla just said, look at the 529 path.
I'm curious, would there be any tax benefits for whenever that 529 benefit is rolled out?
No, unfortunately for that one, the employee would be taxed as receiving additional income.
Don't get greedy, Adam.
Well, I have an 18-month-old, so that you can tell where my brain is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to set the stage for this one. This is probably my favorite one I've read so far. Adam, let's pretend that I've just made my last student debt payment. Okay, and I'd say, Camilla, Adam, this is 15 years of this. I'm done. Let's go get a beer and let's celebrate. Next day, I come in and the Trust Company of Tennessee says, hey, great news. We've partnered with Vault, and we've got this great option to where we're going to pay down some of your student debt. Well, my first question is, whoa, what about me? I just did this for 15 years. And so the question is, can you retroactively apply for this?
Right now through Vault, there is no retroactive application, but it's really up to the employer if there is an employee that's kind of on the fringe and has just paid down their student debt, if they want to contribute to them. But so far, the employers that have started the employer contributions to student loans have seen that enough employees are still dealing with the problem that they don't have to deal with an employee who has just paid down their student debt. However, one thing that is more common is with the employer contributions, employees' balances get pretty low. So we're able to stop the contributions automatically so that no additional payments are made to a student loan that's about to be paid off. Of course, employees have a lot of loans, so they just need to come into our platform and select another loan that they want the contributions to go towards. But it really is up to the employer in a case like the one you just described, Zach, if they do want to, give the employee additional contributions and kind of make an exception for them, I would say.
Okay.
Well, I'm thankful to be on the retirement plan side and not have to have that conversation.
Camilla, we're getting, this is great. We're getting quite a few people who are saying, tell me more, right? How do I learn more about Vault? And 2 or 3 people up here have asked, what are the costs for this to employers or employees? And I guess if there's a blanket answer to that, then fire away. But if it's more about, it depends on this, this, and this, what we can do is send a follow-up to all participants. So it's up to you. How do you want to address that, Camilla?
Yeah, well, I can answer more generally, and then if there are, more specifics needed, they can reach out to me. But it's based on your employee head count. There is a annual license fee, and then a per user per month fee for Vault Pay and Vault Match that we only charge for those employees that are eligible and signed up for the benefit.
Okay, gotcha. Good. And we can also distribute, Camilla, if you got things you wanted to distribute after this, a bit more about Vault or this program, then we're happy to do that.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah, one more on here, and it's a good way to wrap up with this, I think, is this is coming from an HR professional. This person also says that they are currently the point person for tuition reimbursement. And the question is, what's the best way to sell my employer on this idea?
So if you already have tuition reimbursement, I would consider first looking at how many employees are taking advantage of tuition reimbursement. And if there's a lot of employees that aren't really taking that up, but maybe have student loans, I would recommend implementing Vault Advisor and launching with Vault Advisor first so you can see what the student loan debt burden is at your organization. Then you can go to management and say, we have, among all our employees, we have X amount in student debt. It's probably going to be in the millions, even if you have a small head count. And then from there, we'll help you design a Vault Pay program that will maximize the savings that you can give to your employees. So first, look at if tuition reimbursement is being used, because maybe you could use funds from there for the contributions. Second, launch with Vault Advisor to understand what the student debt burden is at your organization. And then third, we'll help you design your Vault Pay program with the information from Vault Advisor.
And I would imagine even sharing some of those case studies that you can probably share with some of your clients about how it reduced turnover or increased recruitment, shortened the loan duration for employees. I mean, those are all great stats that I think management would appreciate.
Exactly. We definitely share those and share them with your management so that they can understand more, not only that student debt is a burden, but what savings the employer can have by helping employees with their student debt.
Great. And Adam, if you don't mind putting up Camilla's contact information, I believe you have it next. Yeah, I just want to put that out there. This is Camilla's email. I don't think we asked her if we could do this, but it's up there. So
you can. I agree to it.
Okay, good. So please feel free to jot that down. Camilla, thank you so much. This has been an eye-opener, I think, certainly for me and probably a lot of us. We hear, clearly we all know there's a big problem with student debt, right? And we hear so much from the new administration in DC around this and so much on this side, and how can I help my employees with it? And I think you've just really cleared up a lot of it for us, so thank you.
Thank you for letting me join. It was great to talk to you all.
Likewise, and coming up on May 27th is our next Retirement Plan Academy webinar. And this one, I understand, is not quite as a hot topic as Camilla's, but yeah, it's very important. So we are going to talk about employee education and advice. Camilla did touch a lot on how they are a resource to employees, right? And so this is really going to be on the retirement plan side. How can you go find providers that are that same resource to your employees and answer all these challenging questions they have? So please join us. We will send out invites for that. Camilla, Adam, thank you very much. And I think that's going to wrap us up for today.
Thank you.
And one last mention, I believe there is a way to sign up as part of the panel that's on your right-hand side. Do we have a link for that in there as well?
Adam, I don't believe I can see that one on my screen.
Well, if it's not on your screen, you can always register at thetrust.com/RPA. So that link is live. So go ahead and register if this topic is of interest to you.
Thank you very much, and everybody enjoy your day.
Thank you.